People can forget a lot of things, but they'll never forget the way you make them feel.
Pros and cons.
Welcome to Pros and Cons, Engagement Unplugged. I'm Brian Rowley.
And I'm Laura Smith.
And today we're talking about authenticity. And let's be honest, every brand out there wants to be seen as authentic. But what does it actually mean? I think there's a big push, and Laura and I are going to dig into this push to be relatable. But the question that we have is relatable and authentic the same thing? Or in the end, are we all just trying to be liked? Today, we're talking about how brands are showing up, what feels real versus what's performative, and whether people actually want authenticity or just want to feel seen or be understood. So let's start with the big question, Laura, when it comes to brand. What does authenticity actually mean?
Well, I think I want to talk a little bit about what it means personally too, right? Because there's obviously parallels there.
Yep.
So authenticity is really about being true to yourself, right? So I would say a brand, it's being true to the brand identity of what they've created. And I think it's about keeps that brand consistent and clear and trusted over time. Authenticity doesn't happen overnight. It's something that has to be built upon. And I think that just takes time, which is different than relatability from my perspective.
I would agree. I think that a lot of people think authenticity is easier than it actually is. But the reality of it is, if you're truly authentic, you need to understand your audience, and there needs to be that consistency, because when you show up, people need to almost count on that you're going to show up a certain way in order to be true to who you actually are.
Well, you can't just become authentic.
Right.
I think that's the difference. I think people can't try to be authentic. It's either you are or you're not. And I think that's where some brands are or they're not. And I think that's where it's okay to be relatable but not authentic, I would say. You don't have to be both. And I think some brands are both, but I think more brands are one or the other.
So how do we define relatability?
I think that's more about being understood by others, right? So that's really about navigating a current moment, being relevant in the medium of understanding the mindset of your audience. It's much more about a point in time and understanding that audience at a point in time to make sure that you have that, you're building that relationship or that connection with them.
I would agree. I guess one of the questions that I have is, can you actually be authentic, or can you actually be relatable without necessarily being authentic?
Yes.
You do?
I 100% do. I think there aren't a lot of, I would say there are some brands like a Nike or an Apple that are both. Right? They have for their reasons. But I don't necessarily know if Wendy's, for instance, if you think about how they show up on social media, they're very relatable, how they talk, the conversations, the culture, the relevance that they have, and they understand what's happening around them. But I don't know if they're authentic. I would consider them more so relatable. But what do you think?
Well, I guess there's a part of me that, I guess, as the way we're defining it, when we first talked about doing this, my initial reaction was, I don't know that whether you can be relatable if you're not authentic. But I think you can, because I do think that there are these moments that you can stand out in without that being sort of something that you've continued to do over time or tried to prove. And I think there's, companies obviously that are out there that are better at being relatable. And, when I started to think about this a little bit, Dove came to mind, right? So I think that's a brand that I looked at and said was very relatable, because it's, they use real people, not models, right? There's sort of that emotional storytelling that they do. And they focus on things like shared values, confidence, self-worth. So in my mind, okay, that's very relatable, but authentic-wise, that was very specific to their existing campaigns. But whether that is consistent across their entire life as a brand, I don't know that that was necessarily their goal. So I do, as we were going into it, and I was like looking at some examples of brands that are actually relatable, that one helped me sort of define it a little bit more.
Yeah, and I read something that I felt was very, kind of a good way to digest it was authenticity is your North Star and relatability is your compass. Right. So it's so from basically being at the North Star as to what does your brand stand for? Is it clear? Is it concise? Is it understood? And then all the way down to how do you navigate? How do you use the compass to navigate those moments to connect with those audiences? So I don't know. It was simple, but I felt like, okay, this helps me demonstrate or understand it as two different things because I think they are.
Yeah, I think that's a good example. I do think, because I think as we look at things that are happening out there, right, we see content that definitely feels more performative, right, rather than purposeful, right? And we're currently like in an environment where you see a lot of that.
Yeah, and I think right now it's a very timely topic is Pride Month.
Yeah.
And we're seeing many brands, I see it like every day at this point since June 1st, so the last couple days. And it's showing that brands that had all the support last year are not showing up this year for that. So then that is performative. Last year you were saying you stand behind, and you want to support Pride. And right now this is all like, their logos were changing with the flag, all kinds of efforts.
Yeah.
But then this year they're not doing it because of potential repercussions or whatever their reasons are. But if they were authentic brands, they would be showing up consistently supporting Pride Month as they did last year or the year before. So it's around us like right now where people question, do I want to engage with a brand that isn't holding true to something that they convinced me last year that they believed in and supported?
Yeah. And I think that takes us into a different conversation, right? Which is, when it comes to some conversations or whether it comes to sort of your voice in the market, is it better to be silent or insert yourself in a moment in time and not be consistent? Because if those brands that you referenced, right, had all the support for the LGBTQ community last year, right, with their, pride flags and all that stuff incorporated into their logos, and this year they abandoned it, like, is that more harmful? Like, would it have been better for them not to make that stance to begin with and ride it out? Or like, what was the motive for them, right, to take that heavy stance, and what caused them to shift that? Because at the end of the day, the people who are supporting them as a brand, I would assume, probably feel very betrayed.
100%. And I think you and I working together for a long time, and a few years ago, there were many situations that were happening where we had to discuss, okay, as a brand, are we going to show up and have something to say? Are we going to, on social, are we going to repost something? Are we going to have a perspective? And there were many times we said, no, we're going to be quiet because we as a brand have never showed up in these conversations before. We are not demonstrating that we have support for these communities or these topics. So it was, we had to talk about it and evaluate that. But there are definitely times where brands just need to be silent and not pretend to have a perspective or not pretend to be something they're not.
Yeah, because I think those silent moments are actually just as powerful, if not more powerful, if it allows them to maintain their authenticity.
100%. And I guess, do you think that people want authenticity, or do you think that they just want to feel understood as a consumer?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the generation. I think it depends on the topic. I think for me, I will speak to me, right? There's nothing worse for me than the example that you just gave. Someone who comes out because there's a shining moment and they can be in a spotlight and then they disappear and don't continue, right? And I think it's a challenging piece, right? Because I think, for example, I feel like Nike, and I always go back to them because I do think they're such a great example of this, right? They stick into who they are and what they are doing because they understand their audience, but they also understand their brand. And I think what ends up happening is a lot of times brands try to be everything to everybody. And the result of that is you can't be everything to everybody. You need to understand who you are and execute against that. And I think Nike, it's never easy, right? When there are some very challenging topics, right, that they take on, and it's not easy for them to stand out there, but they do. And you can always count on them to surround those individual topics and continue and maintain their stance associated with it. So I do think it's a balance, right, of being understood, but I do think that understanding who you are as a brand helps you to understand your audiences and then translates into authenticity. I'm not sure what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think you brought up a point though, the generational thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, is it generational? Like, do we saying that, Gen Z and the millennials even, like, are they all about authenticity, but boomers aren't? I think that's where I think there's probably many discussions and articles and whatever you can kind of dig in on that one, but differing opinions, because I think depending on who you are, regardless of what generation you're in, I think you want to be engaged with an authentic brand. If you really believe in authenticity and that really matters to you, then I think then you'll follow suit with wanting to engage with a brand that is authentic. And others may not care about what they stand for, and they just have a great customer experience and they get what they want and the prices they want. And they're just, maybe that's relatable for them. And so they just continue to engage. So I just don't, I think that the younger generations are definitely stand stronger on the topic,
right.
But I wouldn't say it that cut off at like X or boomers and that they have such a difference of opinion, I guess.
Yeah, but I do think that there are marketers that spend way too much time focusing on likes and shares, right? And trends, which is really what it takes and how I think people measure relatability to some degree, at the expense of saying something that's really real or bold, right? Like making a statement and standing for something and drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is what we stand for. I think there are differences. And I do think that there are marketers who are spending way too much time focusing on those other topics.
But Brian, to be honest, we kind of do that.
I agree. We get caught up in that.
Right? So like, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, look at us. Like we're like marketers of the year that do all the right things. And, it's not the case. And I think that so much of that has to come at the core of a brand and making sure that you're, kind of fulfilling upon what that business and company and kind of stands for. And if it doesn't have certain things, then you have to just go about wanting to be relatable and wanting to be, building a relationship in a different level, I guess, because you still can build a relationship. It just may not be as deep. But I think if you are a strong brand and people really like your product or your service, they're going to still continue to engage with you. And I think I'd rather us as marketers, I'd rather show up authentically in that we're not going to have some bold statements and bold comments because that's not who we are. It's just not. And, we can't change foundationally where, the organization has been built and kind of comes from.
It's not where a lot of people are, right? We're not alone in that, right? There are a lot of companies that have that very clear line that says, this is where we are as a brand. This is where we won't go as a brand. And that's okay. But to your point, be careful not to try to show up in these moments, right? And try to insert yourself in those places because you're looking for likes or shares or trends, right? Like, I don't think you can have it both ways, right? I think you have to understand and accept this is who we are, this is where we're going, and this is what the impacts of that are, and be okay with that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but I do want to move into the next segment. What do you think?
Yeah, let's jump in.
So we're going to put some of this to the test, right? So we're going to play a little game. We're going to call it Keeping It Real. And we're going to look at recent ads or brand activations that are basically topics of conversation around us. And is it actually authentic, or is it just relatable, or is it neither, or is it both? So this is where we stop theorizing and we start reacting to actual campaigns. So let's find out who keeps it real.
Keeping it real on the podcast, baby.
And of course, we've got producer Joey here to help us pull up some ads and activation, and we'll talk about them. Brian and I will kind of banter back and forth. So, Joey.
Got one from Sprite right here for you guys. Sprite targets ads around scorching temps for global summer campaign.
Okay, so this is basically contextual targeting. saying it's hot here, so here's some really refreshing drinks, right? That's kind of what this is.
Yeah.
So, Brian, do you think it's authentic, relatable, neither, both?
Well, I'm going to speak for me.
Well, you can't speak for me, that's for sure, because I would never allow that.
I know that will never happen. For me, this doesn't work either way for me. Because when I think of a scorching hot day, I personally I don't drink soda. So Sprite would not be the thing that I would turn to. Now, if someone was actually if this campaign ran for a company like Gatorade, right? I would be.
Or tequila. We know you like tequila.
All right, that's enough. But now you know too much, and now you're sharing too much. But I think if it was something along those lines, that would work better for me. I just don't think of a soda in a scorching hot day as the thing that I would turn to solve that problem.
So I agree with you that it's neither. 100% do. I mean, some might argue it's relatable because it's but I'd look at that as being relevant. Like it's contextually relevant. You're showing ads in hot days, hot months. And again, you and I maybe are not the target audience, Brian. So no, you're not going to go drink Sprite, but there are many people in this, world that would drink Sprite. So I feel as though it just feels like they're spot on, contextually relevant placements for something that, weather-based and location-based and that. So I think it's smart. I just wouldn't call it authentic or relatable. So I agree with you there.
I think if it was at a barbecue or something like that, putting it into context, for me, it just makes more sense. I don't know. It didn't work for me. I did not think that this was either. And I just don't feel I don't know. I'd be curious to.
But I don't think it's wrong. That's the thing. It doesn't have to be either. I mean, they're going to say they're probably relatable or something, but I don't think it's wrong. Joe, what's up next?
I think we got one more. This is your favorite, both of you, the Sphere.
It's really Brian's favorite. Let's be clear.
I love the Sphere.
I mean, I went and I liked it, but it's Brian's obsessed with it since it opened.
Okay, it's Brian's favorite.
Well, yes. Yes, I will own that. I will take that and say, that this is kind of where it's at. So the concept that they promoted here was on Black Friday, they would be doing the work that they do, right, to be able to measure global shopping, right, purchases and activity from around the world. And they installed it on the Sphere, and there was an app, and you could see how your purchase was actually being tied together. Now, authentic.
But this is sponsored by Shopify.
Yeah.
This is Shopify. So it's not the Sphere. It's just Shopify's using the Sphere
Correct.
As a medium to basically demonstrate all the money that's being spent.
Yeah. I don't think I would say that this one was authentic, but I would say that it was relatable because it was kind of cool to be able to see, hey, there were actually people that were actually making purchases and they could see the numbers changing on their phone, and then you could then see that translate onto the Sphere. So it was real time shopper experiences that actually were actually being captured. So for me, I thought it was very relatable. I wouldn't say it was authentic.
I thought it was neither, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't think it's authentic. I don't even know. Relatable. If we kind of go back to think about what relatable is, I don't know if I think it was small businesses that they were attracting. Maybe. It's hard to say. I don't really know the demographic to know, would this be relatable for them? It is a current moment. They're capitalizing on the Sphere. So everyone knows the Sphere. So maybe I can convince myself it's relatable. I just left it being okay, it's kind of a cool activation, but I'm not the audience. So it was hard for me to really. I agree with you. Definitely not authentic, but it could be relatable depending.
It was definitely an expensive activation. No doubt about that.
Yes, that was definitely the case.
No doubt. So I guess authenticity versus relatability, maybe it's neither. But what we do know is how you show up matters. And I would say that I think from our perspective, Laura, I think, we're obviously will continue to keep watching. I think this is a fascinating topic for just in general, because I think just looking at the way that you see ads appear or things happening, just even thinking to yourself, is that authentic? Is it relatable? Just capturing that. I know for me, that'll be a focus moving forward.
Yeah. And I think it's something that even us as marketers, I would say tenured marketers still had to, we had to really pause and think about this and try to find those examples, or we have to think about it every day to making sure that we are being authentic or we're being relatable. So I think it is an interesting topic. It's also interesting to watch some of these brands attempt to do it right or do it right, and then others who fail. And like I said earlier, the Pride Month activations and what's happening right now around us is showing that, there are a lot of fails or flops. Something we need to keep in mind.
Yeah. I think what we would love is to hear from those that are listening to us. I would love to get feedback on, do people actually want authenticity or do they just want to feel understood? Thanks for listening. And most importantly, if you like what you heard today, be sure to follow us.